Financial Argument. Follow us on YouTube.
Well, the odds of a December rate hike continue to ratchet up. We're now back above 70%. We had a parade of Fed officials, most recently again today, coming out and talking about why a December rate hike is a good idea, probable, possible, appropriate. You name the adjective, some Fed Reserve president, governor is discussing it. So the markets are ratcheting up their expectations. The dollar index continues to move higher. We hit about a 9-month high today. We got above 99. We didn't close there. In fact, the dollar index managed to close down a notch today. Interestingly enough, gold had a pretty strong day today. We're up about $10. I think we're at $12.73 rather in the price of gold. So even if the Forex traders are worried about a December rate hike to the extent that they think it's negative for foreign currencies, the gold traders don't seem to care about how a rate hike might impact the price of gold, because the price of gold is rising even as the probability of a December rate hike is rising, which says either the gold traders don't believe those numbers and they feel that a December rate hike is not coming, or they've correctly concluded that even if the Fed does raise interest rates in December, it's no big deal. It's too little too late to be a negative for the gold market, because the Fed is going to deliver far less than it promised when it comes to rate hikes. In fact, I think the most interesting comment by a Fed official came last week. We got a comment late in the week from St. Louis Fed President James Bullard. And what he said is that the Federal Reserve only needs to nudge interest rates up by 25 basis points, right? So right now, the official rate of the Fed funds is between 25 and 50, right? Because it used to be between 0 and 25. And now it's between 25 and 50. And I think where we actually are right now is 38 basis points. And so if we moved up 25, at least this is the numbers that Bullard is throwing out, we'd move up to 63 basis points for Fed funds rate, which is still barely above a half, right? 63 points for the Fed funds rate. And he says that basically that's all we need to do is nudge it up to 63 basis points for a Fed funds rate, and that's it. We're done, right? One and done. I mean, he said, yeah, we need to do it in December, but then that's it. And then interest rates are going to stay really low for years. He's talking 2 or 3 years or maybe more of ultra low interest rates. And he said, despite whatever's happening in employment and inflation, that this is all we need, that this nudging up by a quarter basis point and we're done. And I was surprised, to be honest, that we didn't get more of a reaction to this admission by Bullard that the next hike, if it comes in December, is the end of it. Because if that's it, and then we're on hold for years, obviously, sometime over that period of time, we're going to find ourselves back in recession, right? Even if we're not in recession now, even if this so-called recovery is still in its twilight. Remember, this is, I think, the third longest recovery of the post-war era, and it is the weakest recovery ever. And of course, it has the most stimulus of any recovery. So despite having the most stimulus, it's the weakest, and it's one of the longest. Clearly, it's going to run out of steam eventually if it hasn't already happened. So if the Fed does, in fact, raise rates ever so slightly in December, and then basically, all right, that's it for a while, we're just going to wait. Well, what's going to happen is we're going to be back in recession. And obviously, if Hillary Clinton becomes the next president, and it's obviously looking more and more likely that that nightmare will become a reality. But if she is, obviously, you know, she's going to try to stimulate the economy, right? Look what happened with George Bush, right? When George Bush was initially elected the first time, right, when he was elected and he inherited the bursting of the dot-com bubble, we came up with a stimulus plan very early in his first term, and the Fed started cutting interest rates. So, you know, the new president wants to come in and try to, boost things up because they want to get reelected, right? Hillary Clinton, the minute becomes president, she's thinking about her reelection. And so she's going to want a stimulus. And of course, the Federal Reserve is going to want to help the newly elected Hillary Clinton to have a second term. And so they're going to try to get that stimulus going. So clearly, this is the end of it. So why didn't the market start to think, wait a minute, if this is all we're going to get, if, 2 rate hikes and it's over, the markets have to start pricing in the easing cycle. And I think this was an ease. To me, every time the Fed says we're going to be lower for longer, that is really the equivalent of an easing of policy. You are reducing the expectations for future rate hikes. And in fact, I do expect that if the Fed follows through with a December rate hike, that they will accompany that rate hike with statements, or they will adjust their dot plots, which is their estimates of where interest rates will be in the future. And they will adjust them to show that the Fed believes interest rates will be lower for longer, despite the fact that they just raised them. So you look at these kind of statements, and this basically validates what I've been saying all along, that the Fed can't really raise rates. And they're only raising rates slightly to kind of prove that they can, but they're not raising them enough to actually make a difference, at least a sharp difference in the short run. But I believe that this bubble is so big, that we have so much debt, that even these itsy-bitsy rate hikes are doing damage to this bubble economy, and air is escaping from the small hole that has already been put there. And obviously not nudging interest rates up even a little bit more are going to make that hole even bigger. But meanwhile, the economic news that's been coming out, again, has not been good. I mean, some of it has been good here and there. In fact, the Atlanta Fed actually notched their estimate for Q4 GDP back up to 2% even. So their last move was down from 2.1 to 1.9. And now they moved it back up to 2. But look, there was some bad economic news. There were a couple of data points that came out above expectations, but there were more that came out below. Particularly some of the housing numbers were very, very weak that came out last week. But, we got a very weak consumer confidence number today. It was a big drop. It was the biggest drop in 11 months. And, I don't think it's an accident that consumer confidence is dropping at the same time that Trump's poll numbers are dropping, because I think that there was a lot of hope and optimism on the part of Trump voters, just like there was a lot of optimism initially on the part of Obama voters. Remember all the optimism in the African-American community about President Obama, because, he was African-American. And so simply having a black president would mean that things would get a lot better for black people. So as if just because he's black, somehow he can do things for blacks that white presidents couldn't do, or because he was black, he would care more. And so therefore he would do things that would help blacks. Well, after 8 years of that, right, blacks under a black president have it's been a disaster. And that's one of the things that Donald Trump points out, is that that's one of the greatest failures of the Obama administration that nobody talks about in the administration, is when Obama ran for office, he was pointing out all of the inequalities, and he pointed out how poorly African Americans had fared during the Bush years, and he promised that things would change under the Obama years. And the only thing that changed was that it got even worse for African Americans under Obama than it did under Bush. Of course, another factor that's going to be weighing on the economy in early 2017 is going to be the increase in the cost of Obamacare premiums. The news coverage now is showing that the expected increase next year is going to be 25%, which is a big number. And so those people that continue to be enrolled in Obamacare are going to see a big increase in their premiums. Well, where's that money going to come from? They're going to have to spend less money other places in order to spend more money on their health insurance. And that reduction in other spending is what's going to be a depressant for the economy. And clearly they're going to want to offset that with some kind of stimulus. Also, of course, this story is not being given a lot of news coverage because Hillary Clinton is associated with Obamacare and it's a complete failure. Yet the media doesn't want to play up the increasing evidence of the failure of Obamacare, which is the escalating and skyrocketing costs. Because one of the things Obama promised, along with the lie, if you like your doctor, you can keep them, was that Obamacare was going to bring insurance costs down. Instead, it sent them through the roof. So that enthusiasm that was there is certainly not there now, right? I don't think any African-American voters are under the delusion that things will get better if they vote for Hillary Clinton. Because after all, if they didn't get better under Barack Obama, why would they get better under Hillary Clinton? I mean, where is Hillary going to be able to succeed where Obama failed? I mean, if a black president couldn't help blacks, why is a white woman going to do it? I mean, is being a woman, is that Trump being black, right? Is it more likely that a woman, by virtue of the fact that she's a female and not a male, is she going to be more caring and more sensitive to the needs of the black community, more so than Barack Obama, who was a member of the black community? I don't think so. I don't think her feminism is going to trump his blackness. And so if he couldn't succeed, what chance does Hillary have? So I don't think you have any of that optimism in that camp. In fact, I think most of the people in the Democratic Party who will be voting for Hillary Clinton are not under the delusion that anything is going to improve based on this vote. I think they're mainly voting for Hillary because they just do it out of rote. They just vote for Democrat, because that's what they've done all their lives. Or they're voting for Hillary because they don't want Trump, because they feel whatever, he's a racist or he's sexist or whatever they feel. They just don't want to vote for him. And so they're voting for Hillary, not because they're excited about Hillary, but because they don't want Trump. But I do believe that in the Trump camp, there is a lot of genuine enthusiasm for their vote. After all, the people who are voting for Trump, given all of the negative publicity surrounding Trump, if they're still voting for him, despite all this, and despite the obvious flaws or problems, it's because they really believe in him. In fact, if you look at these speeches, right, even though all the media, it's all about how, Trump can't win, Trump's already lost. I mean, we might as well, what's the even point of having the election because we already know the outcome, right? He's already done as far as the media is concerned. Yet his rallies are huge. 10,000 people or more show up to hear him speak. Nobody, I don't even know if Hillary goes out in public, but even, her vice presidential pick goes out, nobody shows up to hear him, but you got huge crowds for Pence. So I think the people who are voting for Trump are far more enthusiastic than the people who are voting for Hillary. I mean, they may have been enthusiastic 8 years ago when they voted for Barack Obama, but today, after they've seen the failures under Obama and the fact that they didn't get all the benefits they were hoping for, they may vote for Clinton, but they're not happy about it, right? And that also might be part of the problem and why it's possible we can have a Brexit-type upset, because I don't know how motivated the Clinton voters will be to go to the polls relative to the Trump voters, who are far more enthusiastic about their candidate. And again, a lot of people are just so fed up that they just want to vote for Donald Trump as a protest, just to register how upset they are, right? They just want to basically tell everybody that they're fed up and they're not going to take it anymore. And they want to elect Donald Trump because everybody is against him. All the, the powers that be. And a lot of people, feel left out of the economy. They feel that they've been let down, and they have a right to. A lot of it is for the wrong reasons. They don't realize why things are such a disaster. They may feel that it's because politicians didn't help them enough. It's because politicians did too much. It's a free market that would have delivered the benefits that most people want. A higher standard of living, a higher paying job, right? Those things come from the free market. They don't come from government. But a lot of people don't think so. They've been conditioned to believe that you get this stuff from government, and when they don't get it, they feel left down. But I think a lot of people see the messages, the anti-Trump forces. Everybody seems aligned. It's big government, Wall Street, all of the powers that be, all of the people that the little guy might want to blame for their problems. None of them want Trump, right? They're all saying, don't vote Trump, don't vote Trump. And in order to basically send a message to those guys, what do? You vote Trump. It's like you do the opposite of what everybody wants you to do. All the people that you're mad at are telling you not to do something. So what are you going to do to show them how mad you are? Do exactly what they're telling you not to do. So that is one of the things that maybe, we could actually get some kind of an upset at the polls. But the point I was initially trying to make about all this has to do with consumer confidence. I think that a lot of these enthusiastic Trump voters were also enthusiastic to the extent that they got polled in this consumer confidence measures, because they actually believed that if Trump won, things could get better. Just like the people who were voting for Obama 8 years ago thought that if Obama won, things would get better. Now, they were wrong. And maybe the Trump voters who are so enthusiastic about Trump, maybe they're wrong. Maybe Trump isn't going to make America great again. I'm not even talking about whether he would or he won't. The point is that the people who are voting for him think that he will. And if you thought Trump was going to win and you thought Trump was going to make America great again, and you happen to get caught in a poll of consumer confidence, you would be more confident because you thought Trump was going to win. And it was the anticipation of a Trump victory that was making you confident. So now, as Trump is falling in the polls and the prospect of a Trump victory is diminishing, it makes sense to me that consumer confidence is also diminishing. Because now if you think, well, Trump might not win, well, then why am I confident? Because things are going to stay the same. Things are not going to improve. In fact, they're probably going to get worse. I was reading this op-ed in the New York Times, and it was written by Paul Volcker and Pete Peterson, two pretty good guys, right? And they were talking about how the candidates in the election are ignoring the debt problem, which by and large they are, right? And they point out that the problem is bad and it's going to get a lot worse, but that there's still time to do something about it. And, as much as they're trying to sound the alarm, I still think they're sugarcoating this thing because there is no time to do anything about it. I mean, we have a crisis. We have to deal with that. There's the time to, defuse the bomb was a long time ago. Now the bomb's going off. I mean, we just have to deal with the damage, right? Try to find a way to minimize it and just, get ready for it. But even though they're trying to shine a light on the debt problem, they're also trying to bury it. Because I read in this article, they talk about how our debt to GDP is now 75%. And it's really bad because, debt is 75% of the economy. And that's the same thing. When they had the last debate, the third debate, the last question I think that was asked had to do with the national debt. And it was pointed out at the debate that the debt to GDP ratio is 75%. It's like, what do you mean 75%? It's like 107%. Why are they saying 75%? If they want to talk about how bad it is, why not really talk about how bad it is and use the accurate number, 107? The way they get to 75% is they ignore all of the bonds that are owned by the various government trust funds like Social Security. Right, because the government says, well, we don't have to worry about the money we owe ourselves, right? We owe it to ourselves, so let's not count it as part of the debt. So let's pretend that the debt to GDP is only 75% because we're only going to count the debt that we owe to third parties, right? We're only going to count the bonds that are held by the public, but we're not going to count the bonds that are held by other government agencies. Now, wait a minute. I mean, that's, wait, heads I win, tails you lose, because when they want to talk about the Social Security trust funds, they always want to talk about, oh, the trust funds are sound. The trust funds have plenty of money up until, 2030 or 2040. They want to talk about these trust funds. Wait a minute. But if on the one hand, you're going to say that the bonds in the trust funds don't matter, so we're not going to count it when we think about the debt, then how are you going to talk about the trust funds when you just said they don't matter? They want to have their cake and eat it too. When it comes to talking about the soundness of Social Security, they want to talk about all the assets they have in these trust funds, right, which are all these government bonds. But then when they talk about the debt, they want to ignore those bonds as if they didn't even exist and claim that it's not real debt. Well, if it's not really a debt, it's not really an asset. You can't have it both ways. You can't claim it's an asset and then claim it's not a liability. It's either both or it's none, but they just want to lie. But I think in reality, though, we need to look at the bonds in the trust funds as an actual liability, because does anybody believe that the government is going to default on its Social Security commitments? Because that's what they're all saying when they're agreeing that we shouldn't count those bonds, that they're not real debt, and we should just look at bonds held by the public or foreign central banks, or maybe they're still counting the bonds, I think, held by the Federal Reserve in that 75%. But if we're going to say we're not going to count, the Social Security, does anybody believe that the government is going to tell Social Security recipients, hey, those bonds don't really count, and so we're broke, even though we have $4 trillion worth of government bonds, we're not going to send you out your Social Security checks? We're just going to default? No, of course they're going to honor those payments. I mean, I think that politicians are more likely not to pay the bondholders than to pay the Social Security recipients. I mean, why don't they not count the bonds held by China, right, as part of the national debt? Because obviously we default on the bonds that the Chinese own before we're going to default on the bonds that the Social Security trust funds own, right? Because the Chinese can't vote. But those retired AARP voters, they vote in high numbers. So to try to claim that this is not a real part of the problem, but they don't want to admit, television debates don't want to admit, even Pete Peterson or Paul Volcker don't want to admit that debt to GDP is already well in excess of 100% of GDP. See, the article was saying, and that these guys wrote, is that if we don't do something, our debt is going to exceed our GDP, and that's going to be a disaster. Well, it already exceeds our GDP, so it's already a disaster unless you want to assume right now that we're not going to make the payments to Social Security, which would be an asinine assumption because no politician, even Donald Trump, oh, yeah, we're not going to cut any Social Security benefits. Nope, we're going to pay all the Social Security benefits. So we still wanted to pretend that our debt to GDP is much lower than it actually is. Also, while the press was focused on, who Donald Trump may have kissed without permission, and I actually want to say a little bit about that in a minute, but while all that was going on, that sideshow, there was another WikiLeaks email, which I thought was very interesting, which came from Donna Brazil, where she is emailing John Podesta about how bad the economy is, about how people are in despair, about how, yes, the unemployment rate has come down and people have gotten jobs, but the jobs are really low paying and they're part-time, and that meanwhile housing costs are exploding, and that people are now spending half their income on their rent, and that things are really getting bad. And, the most interesting part about this is that Donna Brazil publicly, if you look at what she says publicly, and she puts out tweets and she goes on as a surrogate, she's on television talking up the Obama administration and how great it is and how successful it's been and how many jobs they've created, right? So publicly, she talks about how great the economy is and how everybody is better off, and, we should elect Hillary Clinton because Barack Obama has done such a great job. See, that's what she says publicly, but privately, she talks the opposite. She sounds like Peter Schiff in private, right? She's peddling fiction when she talks in private about how she talks to people and they tell her how awful it is. How they have so much despair, how, things are just getting worse. It's just like what Hillary Clinton says, right? You say one thing publicly and you say something else privately. This is just, par for the course, I guess. For the Democrats, you always have to have a public position and a private position. But to have somebody who's been a cheerleader for the success of the Obama administration privately talking about what a failure the Obama administration's economic policies have been to the very people who she's trying to claim publicly are benefiting from these successes that she knows don't exist. I mean, this should have been a much bigger story than what was going on with Donald Trump. But I guess when it comes to ratings, apparently one of the women that Donald Trump kissed without permission was a porn star. And so that obviously was a very interesting story that everybody wants to focus on, this porn star that Donald Trump kissed without permission, which, I wanted to get into this topic too, because I started to read all this about, women coming out and saying that Donald Trump kissed me, whether it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, and he kissed me without my consent. He kissed me without permission. And I'm thinking, is this really where we are? Now, I don't know. Maybe this has changed. I don't really know the new politically correct rules. Are guys really asking permission to kiss a woman? Is this really what we've come to? But certainly it wasn't like that 20 years ago. There's no guy that would ask permission. I mean, especially too, when you look at Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood is like an extreme example. But in Hollywood, you have all these examples. A guy will just grab a girl and start kissing her. And in some cases, the woman is squirming around. She's like she's punching him in the back with her arm. She obviously doesn't want to get kissed. But the guy persists. And then eventually she just gives into it, right? And then all of a sudden she's hugging him and it's a passionate kiss. I mean, did Rhett Butler ask Scarlett O'Hara for permission to kiss her? No, he just kissed her. You know, I mean, you've got, a little bit James Bond. Is James Bond asking a woman if he can kiss her? No, he just kisses her. In fact, he kisses her and starts taking off her clothes. He doesn't ask her for permission. This is just, Hollywood obviously is an extreme situation. But how can all this be a big deal now that he's kissing women without their consent? Now, if these women say, well, he kissed me and then I tried to get away and he pinned me down and he pinned my arms to the ground and he forcibly kissed me. All right, that'd be one thing. But if he kissed you without your consent and that was it, I mean, what's the big deal? So this whole thing, nobody is coming out. I don't hear anybody talking about, oh, it's okay. Like, oh, no, he would never kiss somebody without permission, right? Trump denies it. All these stories are false. I don't even know who these women are. And it's all about, well, yes, I would never do that. But why can't you admit, yeah, I don't know, I kissed her. Maybe she was into it. Maybe she wasn't. How are you supposed to know? And of course, let's assume Trump did kiss one of these women without her consent. And at the time, she didn't say anything about it. That was just the end of it. All right, okay, she didn't want to be kissed, and he kissed her. But she didn't make a big deal about it at the time. How's he supposed to know? What's the big deal? Is this what our society has come to? And, you have the economy, right, collapsing. You have voters, basically disgusted. Basically, everything is falling apart. The economy is probably on the verge of the worst economic crisis, including the Great Depression. We have so many big issues. And this election is being decided on whether or not Donald Trump had permission to kiss somebody 15 or 20 years ago. Who cares? But again, nobody comes out and says, you don't need permission. This is not rape. This is giving somebody a kiss, right? And seeing what happens. This is how men and women interact. Now, I don't know who wants to change the whole nature of the way men and women interact, but it seems like it's been all right, for generations. And I still think, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but I think I'm right. I don't think guys are asking their dates for permission to kiss them. I don't. I mean, is this going on now? Maybe it's on college campuses. I know they've gone over the top there on college campuses and on, consent. I make a pretty big distinction in my mind, right? I mean, that's first base. But nobody wants to come out and say that this is all, a mountain out of a molehill, or it's not even a molehill. You're making a mountain where there should be nothing. This shouldn't even be an issue. And even if, Donald Trump, propositioned somebody in the past, what difference does it make? There's nothing illegal about that. Why is it even a news story? And of course, anybody could make it up. I mean, there's no way to verify any of this stuff. What two people say in the privacy of a conversation, that anybody could come up and say something. The fact that the media jumps all over this trash, these ridiculous non-stories, and you got all kinds of real meat, right? All these WikiLeaks data dumps. And I was, the way the Democrats handle this, the way they deflect this, I was watching on one of the Sunday morning shows, and they had the campaign manager for Hillary Clinton and was asked about some of these very damaging emails. And all he said was, well, these things are fake. We don't want to comment on this because, it's so easy to fake an email. You got the Russians stealing them and they can doctor them up. And then that was it. They went on to another subject. I mean, he didn't even answer the question. He already knew. I mean, this is basically what they say, right? Whenever somebody asks you about any of these emails, all you do is talk about how, well, it's so easy to fake emails. You don't actually deny any of the specific allegations because, of course, they're true. So instead of talking about the emails or actually answer the question, you use the emails, right? Once they bring it up, you segue into a discussion about how easy it is to fake emails. And so what you're trying to do is imply that the emails aren't true without actually saying they're not true by talking about fake emails, fraudulent emails, and talking about how this is from the Russians and the Russians are trying to influence our elections and this is Russian sabotage. So you completely change the subject and you don't even have to talk about it. But of course, the interviewer, they ask the question, it doesn't get an answer. They go on to the next because they want to spend most of their time talking about Trump and talking about all these women and talking about the salacious stuff that the TV audience is interested in. And so this has enabled the Clinton campaign to escape all this. I mean, if this was a normal election, her candidacy would have been sunk by all these leaks, by all the hypocrisy, by all the lies. The only reason that she's still alive, in fact, and leading in all these polls is because the media has been able to deflect the campaign away from the issues and focus just on all of the sex and the other allegations that are more salacious and get more ratings. And people can come out and they can feign outrage about how terrible this person is and how we all have to make sure that he doesn't become president. And so then we give Hillary Clinton a glide path to an office that under normal circumstances she never could have slid into.
Today's financial advisors behave like pro wrestling TV commentators. They scream that the recovery is strong, debt is manageable, inflation is low, and that the Federal Reserve has everything under control. They may be oblivious, but the danger is real. Looking beyond the media hype can open a world of broader investing ideas. Euro Pacific Capital is a registered investment advisor that offers stock-focused wealth management services that closely follow the strategy of our founder and CEO, Peter Schiff. We concentrate on those countries that are more closely in tune with Peter's vision of how capitalism is supposed to work. And these investments are not hard to find, provided you know where to look. Isn't it time you change the channel and let Euro Pacific put a little reality back into your portfolio? If you live in the United States and have $25,000 or more to invest, call 800-727-7922. That's 800-727-7922. Non-U.S. residents access similar strategies through Euro Pacific Bank at europacbank.com. Euro Pacific Capital and Euro Pacific Bank are affiliated companies.
Hello, this is Peter Schiff. I bet you didn't know that without silver, you wouldn't be hearing this podcast right now or be able to use a computer at all. From laptops to smartphones to TVs to speakers, virtually all modern electronics use silver to conduct electricity. Did you know that the average solar panel uses 2/3 of an ounce of silver to function? And the solar industry is expanding dramatically, not just in America, but in booming developing nations like China and India. Silver is naturally antibacterial and is used extensively in modern medicine. Silver coatings are being added to breathing tubes, bandages, catheters, and other medical instruments to reduce the spread of infections. When antibiotics fail, silver still works. I believe the 21st century will be the century of silver. As fiat currencies continue to collapse and new uses are found for silver every day, the white metal's strong industrial demand and low per ounce price will make it increasingly attractive to savers around the world. At today's prices, people of any age and background can afford to buy some silver. Learn why silver is a smart and reliable investment in my free special report, The Powerful Case for Silver. Visit schiffsilver.com and download it now. The Powerful Case for Silver includes information about silver's amazing chemical properties. It also explains why I believe silver may outperform gold in the coming years. Download The Powerful Case for Silver and educate yourself, your friends, and your family about the white metal. Just visit schiffsilver.com to download my free report. That's schiffsilver.com.